Sure. So to set it up, it's 12 years. 2006 with the first paper, Patty Valkenburg's paper, where they said we're looking at social media and we're looking at well-being, all the way up until the end of 2018. 226 studies end up in it. And one thing we did that was different than all the other prior analyses, they tended to focus on one kind of indicator of well-being. So you can focus on negative or positive. So there's prior work on depression. There's prior work on social connectedness, right? But there wasn't one that looked at all the main categories of well-being. So in ours, we look at 6, 3 negative that are the most common and typically are done for well-being studies outside of social media too. Depression, anxiety, loneliness. It's on the negative side. And on the positive side, there's eudaimonic, which is like life satisfaction, hedonic, which is emotion, and social well-being, feeling connected, feeling like you belong, social support, these kind of things. So the first thing we can do is like convert them so they all line up. So we can take the negative ones and sort of flip them so that higher well-being means better, okay? So if you're low on depression, you flip it, now you're high. So we convert those into one big giant index, which is kind of insane. And then on the other side of the equation is some measure of how much you use social media. And there's 4 main ways that the field has measured it: how frequently you use it, how much time you spend on it, network characteristics, like how many friends you have, and then subjective experience, like you enjoy using Facebook a lot or stuff like that. Okay, so here's the big finding, the big reveal. And to set it up, a small effect size is 0.2. So Cohen argued that 0.2 is statistically and theoretically meaningful, but practically not. And so ours is 0.01 with a confidence interval of minus 0.02 to positive 0.04. In other words, we have a very precise estimate, and it is 0, right? So we have checked this many times. It's pretty amazing. It's a really tight estimate. As a researcher, it's weird to get excited about a null result in a way. But what it says is that overall, when you look across all kinds of well-being forms, there isn't much of an effect. That's not the whole story. So when we break it apart and we look at those individual kinds of well-being, we see a very small increase, but significant in depression and in loneliness. So more use, you see more depression and loneliness. These are small effects. We detect them though. We have a huge sample. Our overall sample is over 200,000 people. But they're there. It's definitely a real effect. So that's there. And then on the positive side, you get a very small eudaimonic effect, about 0.05, about half the size of the other two, but then a quite large, relatively speaking, of 0.19 for social well-being. So what does that mean? Overall, if you're using it more, you can get a small increase in depression and loneliness. Or sorry, not loneliness, apologize. A small increase in depression and anxiety. There's no effect on loneliness. So bad. And then on the positive side, it's sort of balanced out by a little tiny bit of life satisfaction improvement and a relatively larger social well-being. And when you put those together, they kind of like cancel each other out in a way. So we've been thinking of it as like a trade-off. So you use it and it can increase a little bit depression, anxiety, a little small amount, and it can also make you feel a little bit more connected. And I think intuitively it kind of makes sense, right? Like if I talk to a lot of people, I could get a little bit more anxious too, but I also feel more connected. The overall big story though too is like these effects are really small, right? And it's fitting with some work that just came out of Facebook and their core research team, finding that only about 3% of the 20,000 people they sampled had sort of symptoms of like addiction or problematic Facebook use. Which suggests that, in our meta-analysis, we're looking at a general population, and that for most people, I think most of the time, the effects aren't that big. There's probably a small number of people for which it is actually a big issue.